We were all lied to, not by malice, but by a lack of imagination. Growing up, the textbooks gave us a simple, comfortable image. Jupiter, the gas giant, a massive swirling ball of colourful clouds, a fluffy marble hanging at the edge of the inner solar system. We were told it was a protector, a silent guardian that shielded Earth from cosmic debris. But that simple picture is dead. In reality, Jupiter is a planetary scale engine of liquid metal, a failed star that once migrated through the solar system like a wrecking ball, and a place where the very laws of physics aren't just tested, they are being rewritten. Today, we are going to dive into the abyss, far beyond the reach of the sun's light, to uncover the truth about the most misunderstood object in our sky. Because Jupiter is not what you think, and everything you were taught is wrong. To understand the scale of the misconception, we have to go back to the beginning. Not just to the beginning of your science classes, but to the first time we actually laid eyes on this monster. For centuries, Jupiter was just a bright point in the night sky, a wandering star named after the king of the gods. But in 1974, a small NASA spacecraft called Pioneer 11 captured the first close-up photograph of the planet. Then, 5 years later, Voyager 1 sent back the first moving pictures, a haunting time-lapse of a world that seemed to be breathing, its atmosphere churning in violent eternal cycles. These images were beautiful, but they were also a trap. Because we looked at those clouds and we assumed that the clouds were the planet. We saw gas, so we called it a gas giant. It was a naming mistake that would take us nearly 50 years to correct. The actual size of Jupiter is almost impossible for a human mind to process. We talk about it being the largest planet, but that doesn't capture the weight of it. Jupiter is heavier than every other planet, moon, asteroid, and comet in our solar system combined. If the Earth were the size of a grape, Jupiter would be a basketball. It is large enough to swallow 1,000 Earths and still have room for change. And yet, for decades, our best guess at what was inside this massive ball was based on a guess. The theory most of us were taught in school was the solid core model. The idea was simple. Billions of years ago, a massive chunk of rock and metal got so big that its gravity began to vacuum up all the gas in the early solar system, wrapping itself in a thick, fluffy blanket of atmosphere. It made sense. It was clean. But it was also completely fundamentally wrong. The first crack in this textbook reality appeared in the mid-1990s, thanks to an event so rare it sounds like science fiction. In July 1995, a comet named Shoemaker-Levy 9 was torn apart by Jupiter's gravity and slammed into the planet. It was a once-in-6,000-year collision, and by a stroke of absolute cosmic luck, we were watching. NASA had the Galileo spacecraft arriving at that exact moment. What we saw wasn't a comet disappearing into a cloud. We saw explosions with the energy of 300 million atomic bombs. These strikes didn't just leave bruises on the atmosphere, they kicked the planet's insides out into space. As Galileo flew through the debris plumes, it didn't find the simple chemistry we expected. It found water, massive amounts of it. It found that the gas we were looking at was just a thin, deceptive veil, a skin-deep layer barely 50 kilometers thick. This realization led to the Juno mission in 2016, and that's when the gas giant narrative finally collapsed. As we sent probes deeper into the gravity well, the pressure didn't just turn gas into a thick fog, it fundamentally altered the state of matter itself. At about 1,000 kilometers down, the hydrogen gas doesn't just get thicker, it becomes an ocean. This is the largest ocean in the solar system, but it isn't made of water. It is an ocean of liquid hydrogen, kept in a liquid state not by cold, but by the sheer, bone-crushing weight of the planet's gravity. And then it gets stranger. As you go deeper to where the temperature hits 10,000 degrees Celsius and the pressure is millions of times higher than on Earth, the hydrogen turns into a liquid metal. Imagine a world where the air you breathe is compressed so tightly that it begins to conduct electricity like a copper wire. In the heart of Jupiter, electrons break free from their atoms and flow in a vast, swirling metallic sea. This is the real Jupiter. It isn't a ball of gas, it is a gargantuan, liquid metal sphere. But even this discovery led us to a mystery that has left the scientific community in a state of intellectual destabilization. For decades, we expected that if we looked deep enough, we would find a solid, rocky heart at the center of this metal ocean, a core the size of Earth. But Juno's data showed us something that shouldn't exist, a fuzzy core. Instead of a solid ball of rock, Jupiter's center is a dense soup of liquid rock and metal, all stirred together with no clear boundary. It's a messy, chaotic transition zone that spans half the planet's radius. This fuzzy core is the ultimate simulation paradox. When scientists run computer models of how planets form, a fuzzy core like this should be a temporary state. Over millions of years, the heavy rocks and metals should settle to the bottom and solidify into a distinct ball. But Jupiter has been around for 4 billion years, and its core is still fuzzy. This means our understanding of planetary evolution is missing a massive piece of the puzzle. Either there is an unknown energy mechanism keeping the core stirred up, or the physics of the early solar system were far more violent than we ever dared to imagine. Some theorists suggest this fuzzy core is the scar of a prehistoric crime, a collision with a planet 10 times the size of Earth that happened billions of years ago, shattering Jupiter's original solid heart and diluting it into the surrounding metal. But even that doesn't explain why it hasn't settled back down yet. It's as if Jupiter is refusing to follow the rules of the universe we've written. We are looking at a world that defies our models, a place where the transition between liquid and solid is blurred, and where the energy output of the planet actually exceeds what it receives from the Sun. This brings us to the most unsettling truth of all. If Jupiter isn't the simple gas giant we were promised, then what is it? The deeper we go, the more it looks like Jupiter isn't just a planet at all. It is something far more active, far more dangerous, and far more influential than a simple observer in the dark. We are beginning to see the first hints that Jupiter functions as a planetary-scale electromagnetic engine, a generator so powerful it creates its own rules of physics. And as we will see, this engine didn't just form in its current orbit. It once went on a journey that nearly wipes out the possibility of life on Earth before it even began. The failed star narrative isn't just a catchy phrase. It is a hint at the terrifying reality of a world that almost consumed the entire solar system. But to understand that, we have to look past the fuzzy centre and into the incredible hidden power of the metallic ocean itself. But to prove that the textbooks were wrong, we needed more than just theories and distant snapshots. We needed a forensic event that could punch a hole in that perfect cloud cover and show us the guts of the beast. For decades, our understanding of Jupiter was limited by the very thing that makes it beautiful, those swirling, impenetrable clouds that hide the interior from our view. We were essentially trying to guess the contents of a locked vault by looking at the texture of the door. However, in July 1994, the universe provided a catalyst that would change everything, an event so rare it's estimated to happen only once every 6,000 years. A massive chunk of frozen ice and rock, known as Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9, was hurtling through the solar system at an incredible 216,000 kilometers per hour. But this wasn't just a simple collision, it was a forensic dissection performed by gravity itself. As the comet approached the planet, the overwhelming gravitational pull of Jupiter began to chew on the visitor, fracturing the object into a couple dozen pieces before it even hit the atmosphere. This created a phenomenon often described as a string of pearls, a line of cosmic bullets aimed directly at the heart of the giant. At the time, NASA's newly operational Hubble telescope was ready to observe, but there was a massive problem that threatened to leave us in the dark. The laws of orbital mechanics dictated that the pieces of the comet were going to strike Jupiter on its far side, completely hidden from the view of any telescope on Earth. We were about to miss the most significant planetary event in human history. But in one of those insane coincidences that sounds too good to be true, NASA just happened to have a spacecraft arriving at Jupiter at that exact moment. The Galileo probe, named after the man who first saw Jupiter's moons, was launched in 1989 on a mission to investigate the planet's true nature. It was scheduled to arrive in December 1995, and as it made its final approach, it had a front row seat to the carnage on the far side of the planet. Over the course of 6 days, Galileo watched 21 separate collisions, each one more violent than the last. The largest chunk unleashed an energy equivalent to 300 million atomic bombs. This wasn't just a splash in a bucket of gas. It was the biggest explosion ever caught on camera, a tectonic shift in our understanding of planetary energy. As the planet rotated and the impact sites came into view for the Hubble telescope, the world saw the scars, massive black holes in the clouds that lingered for months. But the real revelation wasn't in the explosions themselves. It was in what those explosions brought to the surface. These impacts kicked up massive plumes of debris that reached thousands of kilometers high, essentially ejecting the planet's internal chemistry into the vacuum of space. For the first time, we weren't just looking at the door of the vault, we were flying through the contents of the vault itself as the Galileo spacecraft moved through those debris plumes. What it found was the first major blow to the gas giant theory. The probe detected water, massive, unexpected amounts of water. This discovery was so strange and so contrary to the models of the time that it forced scientists to completely rethink what Jupiter was made of. If Jupiter was simply a ball of hydrogen and helium, as the textbooks claimed, the chemistry of those impact plumes should have been simple and predictable. Instead, the presence of such deep-seated water and ammonia suggested a complex, layered interior that functioned more like a liquid world than a gaseous one. This was the forensic key that proved the insides of Jupiter were nothing like the outsides. It revealed that the colourful clouds we see are just a thin, deceptive veil, barely 50 kilometres thick, hiding a much darker and more energetic reality underneath. The Shoemaker-Levy 9 impact acted as a 300 million bomb catalyst that destroyed our old certainties. This event shifted the narrative from Jupiter being a passive, protective vacuum cleaner of the solar system to being a dynamic and potentially dangerous engine of exotic physics. The mainstream science of the time tried to frame the comet's destruction as a natural outcome of Jupiter's mass, but the sheer violence of the reaction hinted at hidden internal mechanisms and energy flows that we are only now beginning to understand. The impact didn't just leave bruises on the atmosphere, it left bruises on our scientific pride, proving that almost everything we were taught in school about this planet was incomplete, if not entirely wrong. The debris plumes provided the first hint that Jupiter's gravity doesn't just pull things in, it concentrates energy to a degree that defies earthbound physics. The liquid planet theory began to take root here in the aftermath of the most violent collisions ever witnessed. We realised that we needed a new kind of mission, one designed specifically to look past the clouds and into the deep metallic layers that were churning beneath the surface. This forensic discovery was the direct ancestor of the Juno mission, setting the stage for us to finally address the mystery of the fuzzy core and the metallic ocean. It taught us that to see the truth of Jupiter, we first had to watch it be broken apart. The 300 million bomb catalyst was the moment the gas giant died, and the liquid metal enigma was born. To understand why the textbooks were fundamentally wrong, we have to talk about the ghost in the machine. For nearly a century, planetary science was built on a very specific, very comfortable foundation, the solid core model. It was a neat mechanical explanation for the largest object in our solar system. The theory suggested that at the very centre of all that swirling gas and liquid metal, there was a compact, dense object, a solid ball of iron and rock, roughly the size of the Earth. This was the machine part of the universe, a clockwork system where gravity pulled heavy things to the centre and kept them there in a tidy solid lump. It made sense to our human brains, but when NASA's Juno spacecraft arrived in 2016 to finally take the planet's pulse, it didn't find a machine. It found a ghost. The data Juno sent back didn't just suggest a slight correction, it triggered a state of intellectual destabilization among the world's leading astronomers. Instead of a hard, solid boundary where the liquid metal ends and the rocky core begins, the spacecraft detected what scientists now call a fuzzy core. Imagine a giant, dense soup of liquid rock and metal, all stirred together with no clear boundary between where one state of matter ends and another begins. This isn't just a small anomaly at the centre of the planet. This fuzzy region is gargantuan, spanning about half of the planet's entire radius. It is a massive chaotic zone where the very idea of a solid planet disappears into a swirling, hot, metallic abyss. This discovery created a crisis in our understanding of how the universe works. You see, when scientists try to explain how Jupiter got so big, they usually point to a massive collision in the early days of the solar system. The leading theory is that a rocky planet 10 times the size of Earth slammed into a young Jupiter, shattering its original solid heart and scattering the debris into the surrounding layers. It's a violent cinematic explanation that seems to fit the data. But this is where the simulation paradox begins, and where the ghost becomes truly haunting. Recently, astronomers decided to test this collision theory by running advanced computer simulations. They programmed the physics of the early solar system, smashed planets into each other, and waited to see if they could recreate the fuzzy core we see today. At first, the simulations worked perfectly. The collision resulted in exactly the kind of messy, diluted core that Juno detected. But then the ghost appeared. In every single simulation they ran, the fuzzy core would relatively quickly settle back down. Gravity is a relentless force. Over the course of 4 billion years, that soup of rock and metal should have solidified into a clearly defined ball at the centre of the planet. But it hasn't. Jupiter's core remains defiantly fuzzy. This is the mystery that the original documentaries and your high school science books completely ignored. If our best computer models say the core should be solid, but the physical reality of Jupiter says it is liquid soup, then our models are fundamentally broken. We are looking at a world that refuses to follow the code of the universe as we've written it. This suggests that there is an unknown energy mechanism or a form of exotic physics hidden deep within that metallic ocean that is keeping the core stirred up and preventing it from ever settling. Some researchers are beginning to wonder if we've been looking at this all wrong. Maybe the core isn't fuzzy because of an ancient accident. Maybe it is actively being maintained in this state. This realization is the first step toward understanding that Jupiter isn't just a big ball of gas, or even just a liquid metal planet. It is a region where extreme physics occurs, a gateway to a reality where our rules of gravity, pressure and time don't seem to apply in the way we expected. We are no longer looking at a passive object in the sky. We are looking at a planetary scale enigma that is actively challenging the very laws of physics. The fuzzy core is the ghost in the machine. The piece of evidence that proves certainty is an illusion. We were taught that the centre of a planet is the most stable thing in the universe, a solid anchor that holds everything together. But Jupiter's heart is a raging liquid storm that has stayed stirred for billions of years for reasons we cannot explain. And as we will find out in the next chapter, this stirring might be a symptom of something even more incredible. The possibility that Jupiter isn't just a planet that failed to become a star, but a world that is still trying to ignite. The discovery of the fuzzy core leaves us with a haunting question that the textbooks simply cannot answer. If Jupiter is a world that refuses to settle down, if its very heart is a raging liquid soup that should have solidified eons ago, then what exactly is keeping the fire burning? To find the answer, we have to look at the most provocative label ever given to this planet, the failed star. For decades, this was treated as a bit of astronomical trivia, a catchy nickname to describe Jupiter's massive size. But the more we look at the energy pouring out of this world, the more we realise that failed star isn't just a metaphor. It is a description of a cosmic ignition that almost happened, and some believe, in a very strange way, is still trying to happen. If you were to look at Jupiter through an infrared camera, the image would be terrifying. While the outer layers are frozen in the cold of deep space, the planet itself is glowing. It is radiating nearly twice as much heat as it receives from the Sun. This is a massive thermodynamic anomaly that defies the logic of a typical planet. Most worlds are passive. They take energy from their host star, they warm up, and they reflect some of that light back. But Jupiter is a source of its own power. It is an active participant in the thermal economy of the solar system. Mainstream science has a standard explanation for this. They call it leftover heat from its formation, combined with slow gravitational contraction. The idea is that Jupiter is so massive that it is still literally collapsing under its own weight, and that compression generates heat. But when you look at the sheer volume of energy being released, that leftover explanation starts to feel like a convenient placeholder for a much deeper mystery. This is where we enter the realm of intellectual destabilization. If Jupiter had been just 80 times more massive, it wouldn't be a planet at all. It would have reached the critical mass necessary to trigger nuclear fusion, igniting into a red dwarf star. We would be living in a binary star system with two suns in our sky, and the Earth as we know it likely wouldn't exist. We were taught that Jupiter missed this threshold, that it was a total failure of ignition. But what the textbooks miss is that the line between a giant planet and a small star isn't a wall, it's a spectrum. And Jupiter is sitting right on the edge of that spectrum, exhibiting behaviours that look less like a planet and more like a brown dwarf, the mysterious in-between objects of the universe that are too big to be planets, but too small to be true stars. The deep lore hidden in the data from the Juno mission suggests that Jupiter's internal processes may be far more active than we ever expected. Some fringe interpretations of the planet's heat signature suggest that we aren't just looking at the dying embers of a 4 billion year old fire. Instead, they point to the possibility of unknown energy mechanisms or even weak localized fusion-like processes occurring deep within that metallic abyss. While these aren't the sustained nuclear reactions that power our sun, they represent a form of exotic matter interaction that shouldn't be happening in a dead gas giant. It's as if the planet is a car engine that's trying to turn over, coughing and sparking, but never quite catching. Imagine the environment where this is happening. You are 40,000 kilometers deep, surrounded by liquid metal, under pressure so intense that the very atoms of hydrogen are being crushed out of existence. In this failed ignition zone, the physics of the small and the physics of the large collide. This is where the fuzzy core we discussed earlier becomes so important. If there is a localized energy source, some form of weak fusion or exotic chemistry, it would explain why the core has stayed stirred up and liquid for billions of years. It would provide the spoon that keeps the cosmic soup from settling. This changes the entire narrative of what Jupiter is. It isn't just a protector or a big ball of gas. It is a world that exists in a state of permanent, frustrated potential. It is a star that almost was, still humming with the energy of that near birth. This internal furnace is what drives the gargantuan storms we see on the surface, like the Great Red Spot. We used to think those storms were powered by the sun's light, but we now know they are fueled from below by the rising heat of the failed star. The Great Red Spot isn't just a weather pattern, it is a chimney, a surface expression of a deep, internal power flow that we are only beginning to map. When you realise that Jupiter is essentially a low-energy star, its role in the solar system becomes much more intimidating. It isn't just a passive neighbour, it is a competing source of gravity and radiation. It creates its own environment, its own rules, and its own mini-solar system of moons that it warms with its tidal and radiative energy. We were taught that the sun is the only master of our system, but the truth is that we live in the shadow of two giants. One is a roaring furnace of light, and the other is a dark, metallic engine that is still trying to figure out what it wants to be. The failed star narrative forces us to confront a chilling possibility that our solar system isn't a finished product, it's a work in progress. And Jupiter, with its hidden internal reactions and its refusal to cool down, is the biggest X factor in that equation. It is a reminder that we are floating next to a powerhouse of unknown energy, a world that emits more than it receives, and a planet that might be harbouring forms of matter interaction that we can't even replicate in our most advanced labs. But to understand how this internal fire actually moves through the planet, we have to look at the medium that carries it, because between the fuzzy, glowing core and the colourful clouds lies a substance so strange it sounds like alchemy, an ocean of liquid metal that functions as a natural superconductor. This is where the heat of the failed star is transformed into the most powerful magnetic field in the solar system, turning Jupiter from a thermal anomaly into a planetary scale electromagnetic engine. And it's in that metallic sea that the most profound secrets of the giant are hidden. To understand how the internal fire of a failed star actually moves through the planet, we have to look at the medium that carries it. We are now diving past the 50-kilometre skin of ammonia clouds and descending into a realm where the very idea of gas becomes a memory. At about 1,000 kilometres below those colourful rings, the pressure from Jupiter's immense mass becomes so great that the hydrogen gas is squeezed into a liquid state. This is the largest ocean in our solar system, a 20,000 kilometre deep expanse of liquid hydrogen that stays fluid not because it is cold, but because it is being crushed by the weight of 1,000 Earths. On our own world, we only see liquid hydrogen in high-tech laboratories at temperatures near absolute zero, but here the pressure raises the boiling point so high that this ocean exists at temperatures well over 1,000 degrees Celsius. As we descend further into this dark, pressurized abyss, the very building blocks of the universe begin to break. When we reach a depth of about 20,000 kilometers, we hit a boundary that represents one of the most profound mysteries in all of planetary science, the transition to liquid metallic hydrogen. This is the moment where everything you were taught about chemistry is challenged by the extreme reality of the giant. Under millions of times the atmospheric pressure we feel on Earth, and at temperatures reaching a staggering 10,000 degrees Celsius, hydrogen undergoes a violent phase change. It doesn't turn into a solid like steel or iron. Instead, it becomes a metallic liquid, similar in consistency to the mercury you might find inside an old thermometer. In this state, Jupiter's gravity is squeezing the atoms so tightly that the electrons are literally forced out of their orbits. These electrons break free from their parent hydrogen atoms and begin to flow through the liquid as a massive, unrestricted current. This liquid metallic hydrogen is not just a curiosity, it makes up the overwhelming majority of Jupiter's interior, forming a 40,000 kilometre deep sea of conductive matter. This is where the related and better narrative begins to reveal the gaps in the standard textbook explanation. Most people are told that this metallic layer is just a generator for a magnetic field, but the law vault of obscure research suggests something much more destabilizing. There is a growing controversial theory that this layer of metallic hydrogen doesn't just conduct electricity, it may behave as a natural superconductor. On Earth, superconductivity is the holy grail of physics, a state where a material can transport energy with zero resistance and zero loss. We struggle to maintain this state for even a fraction of a second in our most advanced labs, yet it is believed that the interior of Jupiter may be a permanent, planetary scale superconductor. If this is true, it means that the internal heat and energy we discussed in the failed star narrative aren't just drifting toward the surface, they are being moved with the efficiency that defies our current understanding of thermodynamics. This superconducting ocean would turn Jupiter into a massive, nearly perfect energy conductor. This is the missing link that helps explain why the planet radiates nearly twice as much energy as it receives from the Sun. While the mainstream consensus points to leftover formation heat, the presence of a superconducting metallic sea suggests a world that is far more active and efficient at moving its internal power than we ever imagined. This is the intellectual destabilization we must confront. We are looking at a world where the laws of resistance and energy loss, laws that define our lives on Earth, simply don't apply in the same way. The properties of metallic hydrogen remain largely theoretical because we cannot recreate these conditions on Earth for more than a fleeting moment, leaving us to guess at the physics of the largest part of the largest planet. Imagine the scale of this liquid metal abyss. It is an ocean 2,000 times deeper than any on Earth, churning with currents of free-flowing electrons and liquid rock. This metallic sea is the engine room of the planet, the place where the fuzzy core interacts with the outer layers. Because there is no hard boundary between the liquid metal and the rocky soup at the centre, the entire interior of the planet is essentially one giant interconnected system of exotic matter. This lack of a solid barrier means that the heavy elements from the core are constantly being stirred into the metallic hydrogen, potentially creating unknown forms of matter interaction that we have never seen anywhere else in the galaxy. This is why Jupiter is not a gas giant. It is a liquid metal laboratory where the extreme gravity acts as a high-energy physicist, smashing elements together to see what happens. The existence of this metallic ocean also creates a simulation paradox for our scientific models. Our best computer simulations tell us that these layers should be more distinct and that the energy flow should be more predictable. But Jupiter remains an outlier, a world that refuses to settle into the tidy categories we've created for it. The more we study the metallic hydrogen layer, the more we realize that it is a gateway to a form of physics that cannot be observed anywhere else in our cosmic neighborhood. We are essentially floating next to a gargantuan superconducting sphere that is generating a level of electromagnetic power that is almost incomprehensible. When we look at those beautiful swirling clouds from the comfort of our telescopes, we are actually seeing the exhaust of this massive metallic engine. The heat from the failed ignition at the core is carried up through the superconducting metallic ocean and finally hits the upper atmosphere, where it fuels the most violent storms in the solar system. This means the Great Red Spot and the ammonia lightning storms aren't just weather, they are the surface expressions of a liquid metal sea that is 40,000 kilometers deep. Every bolt of lightning on Jupiter is a reminder of the raw power being generated in that dark, metallic abyss. The hidden truth that was missing from your schoolbooks is that this metallic layer is what actually defines Jupiter. The gas is just the skin, the metal is the muscle. This realization forces us to stop thinking of Jupiter as a planet and start thinking of it as a specialized machine, a planetary scale generator that interacts with the solar wind in ways we are only beginning to map. If the metallic ocean truly is a superconductor, then Jupiter isn't just a failed star. It is a cosmic lighthouse, an object that is constantly beaming energy and magnetic radiation across the entire solar system. And as we will find out in the next chapter, this electromagnetic engine has a reach that extends far beyond its own orbit, creating an environment so hostile that it serves as the ultimate barrier between us and the mysteries of the deep outer space. We are just beginning to realize that the metallic heart of Jupiter isn't just holding the planet together, it is actively reshaping the reality of everything that dares to come near it. If we could strip away the clouds, if we could pull back the curtain of gas and liquid metal and see the world through the lens of electromagnetic energy, the night sky would look terrifying. If the magnetic field of Jupiter were visible to the human eye, it would appear several times larger than the full moon, a shimmering, pulsing violet shroud hanging in the darkness. We were taught that a planet is a physical object, a ball of matter held together by gravity. But once you cross the threshold into Jupiter's influence, you realize that the physical planet is almost an afterthought. The real Jupiter is an invisible monster, a planetary-scale electromagnetic engine that reaches out across millions of kilometers to dominate the solar system. This is the chapter of the story where the gas giant narrative doesn't just fail, it becomes completely irrelevant. We aren't looking at a planet anymore, we are looking at a gargantuan spinning generator. To understand the sheer power of this engine, we have to go back to the liquid metallic hydrogen we discussed in the last chapter. Remember, this substance isn't just a metal, it's a fluid that conducts electricity with nearly zero resistance. Now imagine that sea of conductive fluid spinning at a dizzying speed. Jupiter is the fastest spinning planet in our solar system, completing a full rotation in less than 10 hours. This combination, a massive superconducting fluid moving at high velocity, creates what physicists call a dynamo. It is a machine that converts the kinetic energy of the planet's rotation into raw electromagnetic power. On Earth, our dynamo is generated by a small core of molten iron, creating a field just strong enough to wiggle a compass needle and protect our atmosphere from solar winds. But Jupiter's engine is on another level entirely. Its magnetic field is 20,000 times stronger than Earth's. It is the largest structure in the solar system, if you don't count the Sun's own influence. But here is where the intellectual destabilization begins, and where the textbooks get it wrong. For decades, we modelled Jupiter's magnetic field as a simple bar magnet, just like Earth's, neat, symmetrical and predictable. We expected a North Pole and a South Pole that mirrored each other. But when the Juno spacecraft arrived and began skimming the surface of the clouds, it found something that defied every model we had. Jupiter's magnetic field is broken. It is lopsided, irregular, and filled with magnetic spots that shouldn't exist. In the northern hemisphere, the field is a chaotic mess of multiple poles, while in the south it is relatively smooth. This asymmetry is a massive law gap that mainstream science is still struggling to explain. If the core of the planet was a solid, stable ball, the magnetic field should be uniform. The fact that it's lopsided is the strongest evidence yet that the fuzzy core and the metallic ocean are interacting in ways that are chaotic and unpredictable. One of the most unsettling discoveries Juno made was the Great Blue Spot. This isn't a storm you can see with your eyes. It is a concentrated patch of intense magnetic flux near the equator. It's an area where the magnetic field lines are bunching up and screaming out of the planet's interior. This spot is actually moving, drifting across the planet like a ghost. This tells us that the electromagnetic engine isn't just a static part of the planet, it is a dynamic, shifting force that is likely tied to the deep energy flows coming from the failed star at the centre. The Great Blue Spot is proof that the outsides of Jupiter are being manipulated by an invisible hand from the deep interior. It's a surface expression of a power source we cannot see. But the engine doesn't just stay within the planet, it reaches out and grabs its moons. This is perhaps the most incredible part of the Jupiter enigma, the Great Ionian Battery. Jupiter's closest large moon, Io, is the most volcanic place in the solar system, constantly spewing sulfur and oxygen into space. These volcanic gases don't just drift away, they are immediately caught by Jupiter's magnetic field. The field strips the electrons off these gases, turning them into a ring of high-energy particles called the Eoplasma torus. This creates a literal electrical circuit between the planet and the moon. There is a flux tube of current, a massive invisible wire made of plasma, connecting Jupiter to Io. This circuit carries an unbelievable 400,000 volts of potential difference and a current of several million amperes. It is a planetary scale power line. This interaction is what creates the cosmic lighthouse effect. This electrical connection generates intense radio bursts that can be heard by radio telescopes on Earth. These bursts are so powerful that they are often the loudest things in the sky after the sun. Some theorists in the fringe communities have speculated that this isn't just a natural accident of orbital mechanics. They frame Jupiter as a stabilizing mechanism, a device that uses these electromagnetic interactions to clear its neighborhood of debris and manage the energy flow of the inner solar system. While mainstream science calls it a natural outcome of mass, the sheer precision of these electrical circuits invites us to ask if we truly understand the purpose of such a massive generator. And then there are the killing fields. Because Jupiter's magnetic field is so strong, it traps solar radiation and accelerates it to nearly the speed of light. This creates radiation belts so intense that they represent a forbidden zone for most forms of life and technology. When the Galileo probe was nearing the end of its mission, its electronics were being fried by the sheer intensity of the invisible rain of electrons. Even the Juno spacecraft had to be built like an armoured tank, with its most sensitive computers hidden inside a 1.2 centimetre thick titanium vault to survive. This radiation isn't just a byproduct, it is a barrier. It makes Jupiter one of the most hostile environments in the universe, a place where extreme physics act as a gatekeeper. This is why we have so few direct measurements of the deeper layers. The planet's own electromagnetic shield kills almost everything that tries to look too closely. This brings us to the simulation paradox of the magnetic field. When we run computer simulations of how a planet's dynamo should work, we can't quite get Jupiter's results. We can't explain why the field is so lopsided or why the Great Blue Spot is drifting the way it is. To make the math work, we have to assume there are layers of non-convective material, basically dead zones in the liquid metal ocean, that are blocking the flow of electricity. But we don't know why those zones would be there. This suggests that the textbook version of the metallic ocean is still missing a fundamental piece of physics. We are looking at a machine whose blueprints we don't fully possess. As we stand back and look at the whole picture, the narrative shifts again. Jupiter is not just a ball of gas. It's not just a liquid metal world. It is a massive, superconducting, lopsided electromagnetic engine that is powering a multi-million ampere circuit with its moons and shielding itself with a wall of lethal radiation. It is a generator that is still hot from a failed ignition at its core, moving that energy through a fuzzy centre and out into the void. This is the reality that was missing from your science classes. They told you Jupiter was a gas giant because it was easy to draw in a book. But the truth is that Jupiter is a region of the solar system where matter and energy are being manipulated on a scale that makes Earth look like a toy. When we consider the Great Red Spot again, we have to see it through this new lens. It isn't just a high-pressure weather system. It is a storm that is sitting on top of this electromagnetic engine. New data suggests the storm might be tied to these magnetic anomalies, that the deep energy from the failed star is being channeled through the metallic ocean and erupting at the surface in the form of this 300-year-old vortex. The Great Red Spot is the exhaust pipe of the engine. It is the place where the internal heat and the electromagnetic power finally meet the cold of space. So why does any of this matter? Because if we don't understand the engine, we don't understand the architect. Jupiter's magnetic influence isn't just a local phenomenon. It shapes the solar wind, it protects the inner planets from high-energy cosmic rays, and it dictates the orbital dance of dozens of moons. By acknowledging that Jupiter is an electromagnetic engine, we are forced to admit that our solid mechanical view of the solar system is incomplete. We live in an electrical universe, and Jupiter is the undisputed king of that realm. We were taught to look for life and rocky surfaces, but the real story of our neighbourhood is written in the invisible lines of force that Jupiter screams out into the darkness. In the next part of our journey, we are going to look at how this engine didn't just sit in place. We are going to explore the grand tack theory, the moment this electromagnetic wrecking ball decided to move. We'll see how a migrating Jupiter reshaped the entire solar system, clearing out the super-Earths that should have been here and paving the way for our own world to exist. Because a generator this powerful doesn't just sit still, it migrates, it destroys, and in the end, it creates. Everything you were taught about the stability of our solar system is about to be challenged, because the engine is in motion. We have spent our entire lives looking at the solar system as a masterpiece of celestial clockwork. We were taught that the planets are like gears in a perfectly balanced machine, each one following a predictable, circular path that has remained unchanged for billions of years. We think of the solar system as a quiet, stable neighbourhood where every resident knows their place. But this sense of stability is a carefully constructed illusion. The truth is that we live in the aftermath of a cosmic war zone, and the primary aggressor, the entity that decided which planets would live and which would die, was Jupiter. If you want to understand why Earth is here, why Mars is so small, and why our solar system looks nothing like the rest of the galaxy, you have to look at the grand tack. You have to understand that Jupiter was once a planetary scale wrecking ball that nearly wiped out the possibility of life before it even began. The general theory we were all taught in school describes the birth of our system as a slow, orderly process, a spinning disk of gas, dust and rock gradually clumped together into bigger and bigger chunks. Eventually gravity kicked in, and the planets settled into the orbits where we see them today. It's a clean story. It's a comfortable story. But as we began to discover other solar systems around distant stars, we realized that our neighborhood is the anomaly. In most other systems, we find super-Earths. massive rocky planets several times larger than our own, often orbiting very close to their stars. We also find hot Jupiters, gas giants that sit in scorching orbits right next to their suns. Our solar system has neither. We have 4 small rocky inner planets and a giant gap before the gas giants begin. For a long time, we didn't know why we were so different. We didn't realise that our solar system used to have those super Earths too, until Jupiter destroyed them. This is where the grand tack hypothesis comes in, a theory that challenges everything you were taught about the history of our world. It suggests that Jupiter did not form in its current distant orbit. Instead, shortly after its birth, Jupiter began a predatory migration inward towards the Sun. Driven by the drag of the gas remaining in the early solar disk, the giant planet began to spiral inward, its massive gravity well acting like a cosmic vacuum cleaner. As Jupiter moved, it didn't just attract stuff like a passive observer. It was an active, migrating force that dramatically reshaped the entire solar system. Imagine the early inner solar system filled with the building blocks of what should have been massive super-Earths. As Jupiter ploughed through this region, it performed a gravitational purge. It scattered the rocky debris, smashed protoplanets into each other, and cleared a wide path of destruction as it moved closer and closer to the Sun. Jupiter actually made it all the way to where Mars is today, and it was still moving inward. If it had continued on that path, Jupiter would have become a hot Jupiter, and the Earth, Venus, and Mercury would have never been born. The material needed to build our world would have been swallowed by the giant or ejected into the cold void of interstellar space. But then, something miraculous happened, a great synchronicity that saved the inner solar system. As Jupiter was spiraling toward the Sun, its younger brother, Saturn, was also growing and migrating. Eventually, the two giants got close enough that their gravities locked together in a specific resonance. This tack, named after a sailing manoeuvre where a boat turns against the wind, saw Saturn's gravity pull back on Jupiter, halting its inward march and reversing its course. The two planets began to migrate back outward together, settling into the orbits we recognise today. This migration explains the greatest mystery of the inner planets, the small Mars problem. According to our old theories of how planets form, Mars should be much larger, perhaps even as large as Earth or Venus. But because Jupiter ploughed through the region where Mars was trying to grow, it stole all the material. Mars was left as a stunted, tiny world because Jupiter had already pillaged the neighbourhood. This also explains why the asteroid belt is such a chaotic mess. It isn't a planet that failed to form. It is the debris field left behind by Jupiter's two-way journey, a collection of rocks from the inner and outer solar system that were tossed together like a salad by the giant's gravity. This framing reveals Jupiter not as a passive object, but as the cosmic architect of our existence. This is the intellectual destabilization we must confront. We only exist because of a violent, chaotic migration that was stopped by a fluke of orbital mechanics. Everything you were taught about the natural order of the solar system is wrong. Our system isn't normal. It is a survivor of a catastrophe. Jupiter is the reason we don't have massive super-Earths blocking our way, and it is the reason our planet had enough space and material to form in a stable, life-supporting orbit. But there is a darker, more obscure layer to this story that the textbooks refuse to touch. Some researchers and fringe theorists look at the precision of this grand tack, the way Jupiter moved in just far enough to clear the path, but turned back just in time to save the Earth. And they see something more than just a natural outcome of mass. They propose the protective narrative, suggesting that Jupiter may function as a stabilizing mechanism for the entire system. In this view, Jupiter isn't just a random planet, it is a placed object, an electromagnetic and gravitational anchor positioned specifically to shield the inner solar system from excessive bombardment and to manage the energy flow between the Sun and the outer void. While mainstream science explains this as a series of lucky accidents, the fringe discussions often point to the unexplained regularities and the sheer convenience of Jupiter's role. They frame Jupiter as a silent guardian, not in the sense that it catches comets, but in the sense that it sculpted the very environment required for complex life to thrive. It's a perspective that moves us away from a universe of random collisions and toward a universe of purposeful organisation. Whether you believe it was a lucky break or a calculated design, the fact remains. Jupiter is the only reason the clockwork of our solar system even functions. This migration also hints at why Jupiter's core is so fuzzy and diluted. If Jupiter spent its early millions of years ploughing through a field of protoplanets, it wasn't just scattering them, it was consuming them. The massive collision theory, where a planet 10 times the size of Earth slammed into Jupiter, likely happened during this violent migration period. This collision would have shattered Jupiter's original heart and turned it into the dense soup of liquid rock and metal we see today. The Grand Tack wasn't just a journey, it was a feeding frenzy that made Jupiter the monster it is. The more we study the Grand Tack, the more we realise that the failed star label we discussed earlier takes on a new, more sinister meaning. If Jupiter had succeeded in igniting, or if its migration hadn't been stopped by Saturn, the entire story of the solar system would have ended before it reached its first chapter. We are living on a planet that was built in the wake of a predator. The stability we feel beneath our feet is a gift from a giant that almost destroyed us. This is the ultimate truth of the cosmic wrecking ball. Everything we were taught about the stability of our solar system is a lie. We don't live in a peaceful neighbourhood, we live in a renovated ruin. Jupiter is the architect who tore down the old structure, the super-Earths and the crowded inner orbits, and built the space we now inhabit. It is an active, ongoing force that continues to dictate the fate of every object in our sky through its asymmetric magnetic field and its immense gravity well. When you look up at Jupiter tonight, don't see a protector, see a conqueror that decided to turn back. See the engine that cleared the way for your own existence. We were taught that the planets are independent worlds, but the Grand Tack proves that we are all just decorations in Jupiter's house. And as we've seen, this house was built through violence, exotic physics, and a journey that defies every simple explanation we were ever given in school. Jupiter is not what you think, it is the reason you are here to think at all. But the story doesn't end with the architecture of the past. If Jupiter is a stabilizing mechanism, a silent guardian that shaped our world, we have to ask, what is it doing now? Because as we look closer at the surface expressions of this massive engine, the storms, the radiation, and the Great Red Spot, we begin to see that the failed star is still very much alive. The architecture wasn't just finished 4 billion years ago. It is being maintained every single second by an energy source we are only just beginning to understand. In the next chapter, we will go beyond the history and into the active fringe, exploring the theory that Jupiter's role as a guardian is far more intentional and far more controversial than any textbook would ever dare to admit. If we accept the reality that our solar system was once a chaotic construction site, a place where planets were being born and destroyed in a violent orbital dance, then we have to look at our current neighbourhood with a fresh sense of suspicion. We have to ask why everything feels so balanced. We were taught in school that Jupiter is the great protector of the Earth, a celestial big brother that sits at the edge of the inner solar system and takes the hits so we don't have to. This is the vacuum cleaner theory, the idea that Jupiter's massive gravity well acts as a cosmic magnet, pulling in wandering comets and asteroids that might otherwise smash into our fragile little blue marble. It's a comforting, heroic image. It makes us feel safe, as if we are living in a protected sanctuary. But as we've seen with every other textbook fact about this giant, the reality is far more complex, far more controversial, and potentially far more intentional than we were ever led to believe. This is where we step into the fringe, looking at the evidence that suggests Jupiter isn't just a random planet that happens to be big. It is a strategically positioned stabilizing mechanism. To understand the weight of this claim, we have to revisit the most violent event ever witnessed in our solar system, the collision of Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9. As we discussed earlier, this wasn't just a scientific curiosity, it was a forensic revelation. When those 21 pieces of frozen rock slammed into Jupiter with the energy of 300 million atomic bombs, it was the ultimate proof that the vacuum cleaner was real. We watched in real time as a potential world killer was neutralized by the giant's gravity. For decades after that event, the narrative was settled. Jupiter was our shield. It was the silent guardian that ensured the survival of life on Earth. But in the last decade, as our computer simulations have become more advanced, that shield narrative has begun to crack. This is the intellectual destabilization that your science teacher didn't prepare you for. Newer models of planetary dynamics have revealed a terrifying paradox. While Jupiter does indeed swallow some comets, its massive gravity also acts as a gravitational slingshot. It doesn't just pull things in, it flings them around. Some simulations suggest that if Jupiter weren't there, the inner solar system might actually be quieter. In this sniper theory, Jupiter is actually the one responsible for kicking rocks at us from the outer asteroid belt. So if the vacuum cleaner is a myth, then why is the Earth still here? Why have we had such long stretches of relative peace, allowing complex life to evolve without being wiped out every few million years? This brings us to the core of the mystery, Jupiter's specific, almost impossible positioning. When you look at the data from the lore vault of obscure theories, you find a recurring theme, the idea that Jupiter's placement is too perfect to be an accident. This isn't just about catching comets, it's about the way Jupiter and Saturn work together as a binary system of stabilization. Remember the grand tack, the moment Jupiter migrated inward and then reversed course exactly in time to save the Earth from being consumed. If Jupiter had stopped just a few million miles sooner or later, the gravitational resonance of our entire system would be different. We wouldn't have the stable, nearly circular orbit that gives us our seasons and our liquid water. Instead, we would likely have a highly elliptical orbit, swinging between fire and ice. This leads us to a perspective that is often ignored by mainstream documentaries, the idea of Jupiter as a placed object. Now, I'm not saying it was put there by some celestial architect, but I am saying that we need to acknowledge the staggering level of fine-tuning required for our solar system to function. The protective narrative takes on a whole new dimension when you realise that Jupiter doesn't just protect us from physical rocks, it protects us from the very energy of the universe. As we learned, Jupiter is an electromagnetic engine. Its magnetic field is the largest structure in the solar system, reaching out like an invisible hand to manipulate the solar wind. This field acts as a second line of defence for the Earth. While our own magnetic field protects us from the Sun's radiation, Jupiter's field acts as a massive buffer for the entire inner solar system. It deflects high-energy cosmic rays that would otherwise strip away the atmospheres of the smaller rocky planets. It is a planetary-scale shield that operates on a level of physics we are only just starting to map with the Juno mission. Some fringe theorists argue that this isn't just a byproduct of being a failed star or a liquid metal planet. They suggest that the electromagnetic irregularities we see, the great blue spot and the lopsided poles, are signs of a system that is actively managing the radiation levels of our neighbourhood. Think about the simulation paradox we've been tracking. In every computer simulation of a normal solar system, things are messy. Planets are constantly being ejected, orbits are unstable, and life has almost no time to develop before a catastrophe occurs. But our system is the outlier. Our system is the one where the giant planet migrated in and then tacked back out. Our system is the one where the giant has a superconducting metallic heart that generates a shield 20,000 times stronger than our own. When you add up these anomalies, the lucky accident explanation starts to feel like a placeholder for a truth we aren't ready to accept. We were taught that Jupiter is a gas giant, a passive ball of gas, but everything we've uncovered points to it being an active, dynamic force that has been sculpting our reality for 4 billion years. This is the difference between a house that was built by a random pile of bricks and a house that was designed by an architect. Mainstream science is still trying to explain the bricks, but the law vault perspectives are starting to look at the blueprints. They are asking if Jupiter's role as a stabilizing mechanism is the reason we are the only planet we know of that hosts life. There is a concept in some research circles called the Jupiter Gateway. It's the idea that Jupiter represents a barrier or a gate where extreme physics occur, separating the inner, habitable zone from the cold, violent outer reaches of space. It's not just a physical barrier, but a gravitational and electromagnetic one. If you are a comet trying to reach the sun, you have to pass the king. If you are a radiation burst from a distant supernova, you have to pass the shield. Jupiter is the sentry at the gate, and its fuzzy core and metallic ocean are the engines that keep that gate closed. This brings us to the most controversial part of the silent guardian narrative. If Jupiter is a stabilizing mechanism, then its imperfections, the storms, the shifting magnetic spots, the radioactive killing fields, might not be glitches at all. They might be part of the mechanism. Just like a nuclear reactor needs a cooling system and a containment vessel, Jupiter's violent surface might be the exhaust of a process that is keeping the rest of us safe. The Great Red Spot isn't just a storm, it's a release valve. The radiation belts aren't just hostile environments, they are a security perimeter. Everything you were taught about Jupiter being a dead or passive world was designed to make the universe feel simpler. It was a way to categorize a monster, so we didn't have to fear it. But the real truth is much more intimidating. We live in the shadow of a gargantuan, superconducting electromagnetic engine that may have been specifically tuned to allow our existence. Whether that tuning is the result of a 1,000,000,000 cosmic fluke or a deeper law of planetary organization is the question that keeps modern astronomers up at night. Because if we admit that Jupiter is a stabilizer, we have to admit that we don't fully understand the code of our own solar system. We have to admit that our solid core models were just toys, and that the fuzzy core is a sign that we are looking at a form of matter and energy interaction that defies our current simulations. The intellectual destabilization is complete. The more we learn about our protector, the more we realize that we are at the mercy of a force that is far more active and far more mysterious than a ball of gas could ever be. So is Jupiter a silent guardian, or just a lucky wrecking ball? The answer depends on how much you are willing to look past the textbook and into the anomalies. We see a planet that migrated with surgical precision. We see a planet that emits its own internal heat like a failed star. We see a planet that creates a superconducting shield to protect its neighbours. At what point do we stop calling these coincidences and start calling them functions? As we prepare to move into the final chapters of this investigation, we have to look at the surface of the giant one last time. We have to look at those beautiful swirling clouds and recognise them for what they truly are, the interface between our stable, protected world and the exotic, liquid metal abyss of the king. The great red spot is still screaming, the magnetic field is still pulsing, and the fuzzy core is still refusing to settle. The engine is running, the guard is on duty, and the mystery is only getting deeper. Because once you realise that Jupiter is a stabilising mechanism, you have to ask, what exactly is it stabilising us for? And what happens if that engine ever starts to change? In the next chapter, we will look at the surface expressions of these deep secrets and how the red spot might be the ultimate key to understanding the energy that is keeping our world alive. When you look at a photograph of Jupiter, your eye is immediately drawn to one thing, the Great Red Spot. It is the most famous landmark in the solar system, an iconic crimson eye that has been staring back at us for at least 300 years. In your school textbooks, this was described as a massive, high-pressure storm, a hurricane so large it could swallow the Earth twice over. We were taught that it was an atmospheric quirk, a byproduct of the planet's fast rotation and its complex cloud bands. But as we have peeled back the layers of this giant from the fuzzy core to the metallic ocean, we are beginning to realise that the Great Red Spot is not just a storm. It is a surface expression of the planet's deepest, darkest secrets. It is the exhaust pipe of a planetary scale engine and the window into a realm of exotic chemistry that we are only just beginning to understand. If everything you were taught about Jupiter's interior is wrong, then everything you were taught about its surface is a lie as well. To understand why the Great Red Spot is so much more than a storm, we have to look at its verticality. For centuries, we viewed Jupiter as a flat image, a two-dimensional marble. We assumed the storms were shallow, skating across the top of the atmosphere like oil on water. But when the Juno spacecraft arrived and performed its deep gravity soundings, the results triggered a massive wave of intellectual destabilization. We discovered that the Great Red Spot isn't just wide, it is incredibly deep. It extends at least 300 to 500 kilometers down into the atmosphere. To put that in perspective, imagine a cloud 10 times taller than Mount Everest and 10 times deeper than the deepest trench in the Earth's oceans. This isn't a weather event as we understand it. It is a structural feature of the planet. This depth is the first clue that the storm is being powered from below, not from above. On Earth, hurricanes are fueled by the warmth of the ocean's surface and the moisture in the air. They are top-down events, but Jupiter's Great Red Spot is a bottom-up phenomenon. It is sitting directly on top of the massive energy flows we discussed in the failed star narrative. Remember, Jupiter radiates nearly twice as much heat as it receives from the Sun. That heat has to go somewhere. It rises from the fuzzy core, travels through the superconducting metallic ocean, and finally erupts through the ammonia clouds. The Great Red Spot is the primary chimney for this internal furnace. It is a localized eruption of deep energy that has remained stable for centuries because it is anchored to the deep internal dynamics of the planet. This brings us to the mystery of the colour. Why is it red? If you look at the rest of Jupiter, the clouds are mostly whites, browns and pale yellows, colours we associate with ammonia and sulphur. But the spot is a deep, bruised crimson. The textbook explanation is that solar UV light reacts with chemical compounds in the upper atmosphere to create this colour. But this explanation has always been a bit weak. If it's just UV light, why isn't the entire sun-facing side of the planet red? The lore vault of obscure research suggests a much more provocative answer. The colour is the result of exotic chemistry being dredged up from the deep. In the lower layers of Jupiter, beneath the 50-kilometre skin of ammonia clouds, the pressure and temperature reach levels where chemistry starts to look like alchemy. We call this the exotic chemistry layer. Here, elements that would never interact on Earth are forced together into complex organic molecules and phosphorus-rich compounds. The Great Red Spot is effectively a giant vacuum that is sucking this deep, dark material from the interior and spraying it across the surface. The red we see isn't just a chemical reaction to the sun, it is the blood of the planet's deep interior being brought to the light. This is why the spot reaches higher into the atmosphere than any other cloud bank on the planet. It is being pushed up by a pillar of rising heat and exotic matter. But the surface expressions of Jupiter's deep secrets don't stop with the red spot. If you look closely at the white zones and brown belts that ring the planet, you are seeing the result of a process scientists call mushballs. This sounds like a joke, but it is one of the most significant discoveries of the last decade. In the upper atmosphere, ammonia acts as a natural antifreeze. It interacts with water ice crystals to create a slushy, high-pressure mixture. These mushballs are essentially ammonia-heavy hailstones that fall deep into the planet, melting and evaporating before rising back up to fuel the massive lightning storms that rage across the surface. These lightning storms are thousands of times more powerful than anything on Earth. On our planet, lightning is a surface phenomenon. On Jupiter, it is a planetary scale electrical discharge that bridges the gap between the gaseous outside and the metallic inside. Every bolt of Jovian lightning is a reminder that the electromagnetic engine is working. These storms are the spark plugs of the planet, triggered by the rising jets of hot gas that reach deep down into the ammonia rain layers. When you see a flash of light on Jupiter, you aren't just seeing weather, you are seeing the moment the failed star's internal energy successfully punches through the atmospheric veil. This realization forces us into another simulation paradox. When we try to model these storms using standard atmospheric physics, they don't last. In a normal gas giant, a storm like the Great Red Spot should have dissipated within a few decades. The fact that it has persisted for over 300 years suggests that there is a missing energy component that our current models aren't capturing. This ties back to the fuzzy core and the magnetic asymmetries. Some researchers have noted that the Great Red Spot sits in a region of unique magnetic flux. It's possible that the storm isn't just an atmospheric vortex, but an electromagnetic one, a place where the magnetic field lines are funneling energy from the liquid metal ocean directly to the surface. This would mean the Great Red Spot is essentially a permanent hurricane fueled by a superconducting generator. It is the ultimate expression of the failed star refusing to stay quiet. We were taught that the surface of Jupiter was a chaotic mess of random clouds, but we are starting to see a terrifying level of organisation. The planet's belts and zones are actually deep-seated cylinders of moving fluid that reach thousands of kilometres into the interior. They are like the gears of a clock, all driven by the central engine of the metallic hydrogen sea. There is also the question of chemical organisation. In the deep high-pressure layers where the ammonia rain turns into exotic slush, some fringe theories suggest that matter might be organising itself in ways that mimic the complexity of life, even if it isn't life as we define it. They call this non-biological complexity. While there is no evidence of Jovians swimming in the metallic sea, the idea that Jupiter's deep atmosphere could host entirely different forms of chemical engines is a recurring theme in the lore vault. It suggests that Jupiter is not just a place where physics are extreme, but where the very definition of active matter is being challenged. When we look at the fringe idea that Jupiter is a stabilizing mechanism, the Great Red Spot takes on an even more mysterious role. Some have suggested that these massive storms act as heat sinks or pressure valves that regulate the planet's internal temperature. If Jupiter is a failed star that is still trying to ignite, the Great Red Spot might be the mechanism that prevents that ignition from becoming catastrophic. It is the safety valve that allows the excess energy to bleed off into space, keeping the planet in its current stable state. This leads us to a chilling observation. The Great Red Spot is shrinking. Since we first began measuring it in the late 1800s, the eye of Jupiter has been getting smaller and more circular. Mainstream science says it's just a natural cycle of a dying storm. But if the spot is the exhaust pipe of the internal engine, its disappearance could mean something much more significant. It could mean the engine is changing its state. It could mean the energy flows from the fuzzy core are shifting. If the Great Red Spot vanishes, we won't just lose a pretty landmark. We will be witnessing a fundamental change in the metabolism of the solar system's largest resident. Everything you were taught about Jupiter's surface was designed to make it seem predictable. It's just a storm. It's just gas. But the truth is that the surface is a battlefield where deep, exotic forces are fighting to reach the light. The Great Red Spot is a crimson warning that the interior of the planet is far more active than we were led to believe. It is a 300-year-old testament to the power of the liquid metal ocean and the heat of the failed star. As we look at the swirling clouds of Jupiter, we have to stop seeing them as gas. We have to see them as the skin of a much deeper, much more powerful entity. The ammonia rain, the 300 million bomb catalysts of comet impacts, and the mushballs of the deep atmosphere are all part of a single interconnected system. Jupiter is a world where the surface and the core are in constant communication, linked by superconducting currents and pillars of rising exotic matter. This brings us to the final synthesis of the Jupiter enigma. We have explored the fuzzy core that shouldn't be liquid. We have dived into the metallic ocean that acts as a superconductor. We have witnessed the grand tack that reshaped our solar system and the electromagnetic engine that protects it. And now we see that the Great Red Spot is the window through which we can observe all of these secrets at once. It is the point where the unseen becomes seen. In our final chapter, we will bring all of these threads together to face the ultimate question. If Jupiter is not what we think, if it is a liquid metal engine, a failed star, and a strategic guardian, then what does that mean for our future? As our probes continue to peel back the layers, and as the Great Red Spot continues to shrink and shift, we are forced to realize that the king of the planets is still evolving. The mystery of Jupiter isn't a history lesson, it is an ongoing event. We are living in the age of the Jupiter enigma, and as we are about to see, the final secret of the giant might be the most destabilizing of all, because the more we learn about what Jupiter is, the more we have to ask what it is becoming. We have reached the end of our descent, standing, at least metaphorically, at the center of the most complex and intimidating object in our solar system. We have traveled from the deceptive, swirling ammonia clouds through an ocean of liquid hydrogen deeper than any sea on Earth. We have navigated the crushing pressures of the metallic hydrogen abyss, a realm where the very atoms of the universe are squeezed into a superconducting state. We have looked into the fuzzy heart of the giant, a chaotic soup of liquid rock and metal that refuses to follow the laws of physics as we've written them. And throughout this journey, one theme has remained constant. Everything you were taught about this world is wrong. But now, in this final chapter, we have to face the most destabilizing truth of all. The mystery of Jupiter isn't just about what is inside the planet. It is about what Jupiter tells us about the nature of the universe itself. We are forced to realize that Jupiter is not just a planet. It is a region where the laws of physics as we know them begin to blur, a cosmic gateway that challenges our very definition of reality. This is the ultimate synthesis of the Jupiter enigma. When we look at the data from the Juno mission and the forensic evidence from the Shoemaker-Levy 9 impact, we are left with a series of contradictions that mainstream science is still struggling to reconcile. We were taught that the universe is a place of order and predictable cycles, yet Jupiter remains a defiant outlier. We have a planet that should have a solid core, but instead has a fuzzy one. We have a world that should have cooled down eons ago, but instead radiates the heat of a failed star. We have a magnetic field that should be symmetrical, but instead is a lopsided, shifting mess of electromagnetic spots. If we are honest with ourselves, we have to admit that our models haven't just failed to explain Jupiter. They have revealed that our understanding of planetary formation is fundamentally incomplete. Think back to the simulation paradox we discussed earlier. This is perhaps the most significant intellectual destabilization of the modern era. When our most advanced supercomputers, programmed with every law of physics we hold dear, try to build a Jupiter, they fail. They create a world that settles, a world that solidifies, a world that follows the rules. But the real Jupiter, hanging there in the dark, refuses to settle. It has remained in a state of liquid soup for 4 billion years. This tells us that there is a missing piece in the code of our reality. Whether it is an unknown energy mechanism, a form of exotic matter interaction, or a property of metallic hydrogen that we simply cannot fathom, Jupiter is proof that there are unknown unknowns still lurking in our own backyard. We are looking at a world that functions as a planetary scale laboratory for physics that cannot be observed anywhere else in the nearby universe. This brings us to the gateway concept. We were taught to see Jupiter as a destination, a place to send probes and take pictures. But the law vault of obscure research suggests we should see it as a barrier. Jupiter represents the transition point between the tame physics of the inner solar system and the wild physics of the deep outer void. Its immense gravity, its lethal radiation belts, and its superconducting heart create an environment so hostile that it acts as a filter. It is a region where matter is forced into states that defy our laboratory recreations. In the deep interior, where the metallic hydrogen ocean meets the fuzzy core, we are likely seeing the birth of chemistry that doesn't rely on the same rules of bonding and stability that we see on Earth. It is an environment of non-biological complexity, a place where energy and matter are organized in ways that are totally alien to our experience. When we call Jupiter a failed star, we often do so with a sense of pity, as if the planet missed its chance at greatness. But the evidence suggests we should see it as a successful engine. Jupiter didn't fail to ignite. It reached a perfect state of equilibrium that allowed it to become the cosmic architect of our system. If it had ignited, the Earth would not be here. If it hadn't migrated through the Grand Tack, the Earth would not be here. If it didn't generate its massive electromagnetic shield, our atmosphere might have been stripped away by cosmic rays long ago. We were taught that the Earth is the centre of the story, but the deeper we look, the more it seems that the Earth is just a byproduct of Jupiter's ongoing metabolism. We are the beneficiaries of a stabilising mechanism that we are only just beginning to understand. But there is a haunting edge to this realisation. If Jupiter is a mechanism, and that mechanism is changing, If the great red spot is shrinking, if the magnetic poles are shifting, if the fuzzy core is eventually going to settle, then what does that mean for the stability of our own world? We have spent centuries assuming that the solar system is a finished product, a static stage for the human drama. But Jupiter is a reminder that the stage is still being built, and the architect is still at work. The gas giant was a comfortable lie because it made the planet seem passive. The liquid metal enigma is a terrifying truth because it means the planet is active. It is a world that is still evolving, still radiating, and still manipulating the space around it with invisible fingers of electromagnetic force. This is the point of intellectual destabilization where we must leave behind the certainty of the textbook and embrace the wonder of the unknown. We have learned that Jupiter is a 40,000 kilometre deep sea of liquid metal. We have learned that its heart is a soup of rock and iron that defies gravity. We have learned that it protected us by nearly destroying us during the Grand Tack. But for every answer we have found, we have uncovered 10 more questions. How does a fuzzy core stay stirred for billions of years? What is the true nature of a natural superconductor on a planetary scale? What exotic chemistry is hiding in the depths of the Great Red Spot? As our technology advances and as missions like Juno continue to beam back data that contradicts our expectations, we are forced into a position of scientific humility. We are realizing that the more we know about Jupiter, the more we realize how little we know about anything else. If we were so wrong about the biggest thing in our solar system, what else have we misunderstood? What other gas giants in the galaxy are actually liquid metal engines? What other empty spaces are actually filled with the invisible webs of planetary dynamos? Jupiter is the key that unlocks a much larger, much stranger universe. It is the evidence that the cosmos is not a collection of objects, but a network of energies and exotic states of matter that we are just starting to map. The final lesson of the Jupiter enigma is that certainty is an illusion. We want the universe to be simple. We want it to be a layer cake of gas and rock. But the universe is a fuzzy core, a place of messy transitions, irregular fields, and failed ignitions that somehow produce life. Jupiter is not what you think because the universe is not what you think. It is more complex, more violent, and more beautiful than any textbook could ever capture. The king of the planets sits out there in the dark, spinning at a dizzying speed, churning its metallic sea, and screaming its radio bursts into the void, a permanent reminder that we are just guests in a house built by a giant. We were taught that we had solved the mystery of the gas giant decades ago, but as we have seen, the real investigation is only just beginning. Every time we send a probe, every time we witness a comet impact, and every time we run a simulation that fails, we are getting closer to a truth that is far more profound than hydrogen and helium. We are looking at the face of the failed star, the superconducting engine, and the cosmic architect. And as we look into that great red eye, we have to admit that we aren't just looking at a planet. We are looking at the limits of our own understanding. Jupiter is the ultimate exploration of uncertainty itself. It is a giant mystery in the sky, not just begging to be solved, but begging to be respected. Because everything you were taught was wrong, and the truth is much, much better.